Welcome back to Lore 2 RPG, where we dive deep into gaming's greatest stories. Today, we journey into the shadowed corners of the lands between to explore one of Elden Ring's most enigmatic and influential factions, the Black Knife Assassins. Over the next hour or so, we'll uncover the dark truths behind these mysterious women, their pivotal role in the Night of the Black Knives, and the complex web of betrayal that shapes the very foundation of the Shattering. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin this epic adventure together into the realm of silent death and political intrigue. In the annals of Elden Ring's history, few events have shaped the world as profoundly as the Night of the Black Knives. On that fateful evening, a group of elite assassins wielding cursed daggers brought low the mightiest of demigods, setting in motion a chain of events that would ultimately shatter the very order of the world. These weren't ordinary killers lurking in dark alleys or common cutthroats seeking coin. No, the Black Knife Assassins were something far more dangerous. A sisterhood of Numen women, bound by purpose and tragedy, whose actions would echo through the ages. To understand the Black Knife Assassins, we must first understand what they represent in the grand tapestry of Elden Ring's lore. They are not merely antagonists or obstacles to overcome. They are the living embodiment of secrets kept, promises broken, and the terrible price of political machination. Each assassin carries with her not just a blade, imbued with the power of death itself, but also a story of loyalty, tested, betrayal endured, and purpose twisted by forces beyond mortal comprehension. Origins and race, the Numen connection. The Black Knife Assassins belong to the mysterious Numen race, a people whose very existence speaks to the cosmic scope of Elden Ring's mythology. According to the lore found within their distinctive armor, these assassins were all women and rumored to be Numen who had close ties with Marika herself. This connection to Queen Marika the Eternal is not merely coincidental. It forms the very foundation of their story and explains much about their motivations and capabilities. The Numen are described as a race of long-lived beings who descend from another world entirely. This otherworldly origin immediately sets them apart from the native peoples of the lands between. They are, in essence, aliens to this realm, bearing knowledge and power from beyond the stars. This extraterrestrial heritage explains much about their remarkable abilities and their resistance to conventional forms of death and decay. Queen Marika herself is a Numen, which creates a fascinating dynamic when we consider the Black Knife Assassin's actions. These women share more than just a racial bond with the goddess who rules the lands between. They share a fundamental understanding of what it means to be outsiders in a world that was not originally their own. This shared experience of displacement may have forged bonds deeper than mere political alliance. The fact that all Black Knife Assassins are women has led some scholars to theorize that the Numen race might be entirely female, or at least that only the women of their kind possess the particular qualities necessary for their deadly craft. This gender exclusivity isn't merely a biological curiosity. It speaks to something deeper about the nature of their power and their role in the cosmic order. Consider the implications of this racial heritage. The Numen's longevity means that these assassins have lived through ages of change in the lands between. They have witnessed the rise and fall of kingdoms, the ebb and flow of different orders, and the slow corruption of ideals they once held dear. This vast experience would have shaped their worldview in ways that shorter-lived races could never comprehend. Their otherworldly nature also explains their remarkable abilities. The Black Knife Assassins move with supernatural grace, appearing and disappearing like shadows given form. Their resistance to conventional weapons and their immunity to many forms of damage isn't just game mechanics. It's a reflection of their alien physiology and their connection to forces beyond the material realm. The Eternal Cities connection The Black Knife Assassin's story cannot be told without examining their deep connections to the eternal cities of Nokron and Nokstella. According to Rogier, that astute sorcerer who spent considerable time investigating the Night of the Black Knives, these assassins were scions of the Eternal City. This connection reveals layers of political complexity that stretch back to some of the oldest conflicts in the lands between. The Eternal Cities represent rebellion against the Greater Will in its most fundamental form. These underground metropolises were once above ground, home to the Nox people who dared to challenge the cosmic order imposed by the Two Fingers and their outer god. Their punishment was swift and terrible. The cities were cast underground, cut off from the stars they revered, condemned to eternal darkness beneath a false sky. The Nox people of these cities developed remarkable technologies and magical arts in their isolation. They created the Silver Tears, those shape-shifting entities that could mimic any form. They forged weapons from liquid metal that could reshape itself according to the wielder's will. Most importantly for our story, they created the Fingerslayer Blade, a weapon specifically designed to kill the Two Fingers and strike at the very heart of the Greater Will's power. This technological and magical prowess explains much about the Black Knife Assassin's capabilities. Their weapons, those misshapen daggers imbued with the power of death, represent a fusion of Eternal City craftsmanship and forbidden knowledge. The concealing veils that make them nearly invisible, the armor that muffles all sound of their movement, the very techniques they employ. All of these bear the hallmarks of Nox innovation. But the connection goes deeper than mere technology. The Black Knife Assassins represent the Eternal City's continued resistance to the Golden Order, even centuries after their initial defeat. When they struck down Godwyn the Golden, they weren't just committing murder. They were continuing a war that began before most of the current players in the lands between were even born. The relationship between the Nox and the Numen is particularly intriguing when we consider that both races seem to have origins beyond the lands between. Some scholars theorize that they might be related peoples, perhaps different branches of the same cosmic tree, which would explain the natural alliance between the Black Knife Assassins and the Eternal Cities. This connection also explains why the Assassins possess the knowledge and means to steal a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith. Such a theft would require not just physical prowess, but deep understanding of the cosmic forces at play. The Nox, with their long history of rebellion against the Greater Will, would have accumulated precisely this type of forbidden knowledge over the centuries. The Night of the Black Knives, a pivotal moment. The Night of the Black Knives stands as perhaps the most significant single event in Elden Ring's modern history, rivaling even the Shattering itself in its far-reaching consequences. On this dark, wintry evening, the Black Knife Assassins executed a plan that would fundamentally alter the nature of existence in the lands between. The assassination of Godwyn the Golden was not a random act of violence or a crime of passion. It was a carefully orchestrated operation that required precise timing, intimate knowledge of the target's location and defenses, and access to power that had been sealed away for centuries. The fact that they succeeded speaks to both their exceptional skill and the depth of the conspiracy that enabled their actions. Godwyn was no ordinary target. As the son of Queen Marika and the first Elden Lord Godfrey, he represented the pinnacle of the Golden Order's strength and legitimacy. He was beloved by his people, mighty in battle, and protected by the most formidable defenses the Golden Order could muster. Yet on that fateful night, he fell to the assassin's cursed blades like any mortal man. The weapons themselves tell a crucial part of this story. The Black Knife Assassins wielded daggers that had been imbued with a fragment of the Rune of Death through what Ranni describes as a fearsome rite. This wasn't simply a matter of coating their blades with poison or enchanting them with conventional magic. They had somehow incorporated the very essence of destined death into their weapons, granting them the power to kill even those who should have been immortal. The theft of this power from Malekith the Black Blade represents one of the most audacious crimes in the history of the Lands Between. Malekith was Queen Marika's own shadowbound beast, the ultimate guardian of the Rune of Death. He was specifically chosen to keep this power sealed away, to prevent anyone from wielding the ability to grant true death to the gods and demigods. Yet somehow, the conspirators behind the Knight of the Black Knives managed to steal a fragment of this sealed power. What happened to Godwyn on that night was unique in the annals of death in the Lands Between. The assassin's blades killed his soul while leaving his body intact, creating a form of undeath that had never been seen before. This wasn't the clean death of a warrior fallen in battle or the peaceful passing of age. This was something twisted and unnatural, a perversion of the natural order that would have consequences far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The aftermath of the assassination reveals the true scope of what the assassins had accomplished. Godwyn's soulless body didn't simply decay and return to the earth. Instead, it became something monstrous, a source of corruption that spread deathroot throughout the Lands Between. His undead presence began to influence and corrupt other aspects of the world, creating new forms of undeath and spreading his cursed existence like a plague. The orchestrator, Ranni's role. While the Black Knife assassins wielded the blades that night, they were not the true architects of the conspiracy. That distinction belongs to Ranni the Witch, one of Queen Marika's stepdaughters, and an Empyrean chosen by the Two Fingers as a potential successor to the goddess. Ranni's role in the Knight of the Black Knives reveals the complex political and personal motivations that drove this world-changing event. Ranni's motivation for orchestrating Godwyn's assassination stems from her fundamental opposition to the greater will and the cosmic order it represented. As an Empyrean, she was marked from birth to potentially become a vessel for an outer god, to serve as a conduit for powers beyond mortal comprehension. But Ranni rejected this fate, choosing instead to forge her own path toward a future free from the greater will's influence. The ritual that Ranni performed to imbue the Black Knife assassin's weapons with the power of death was described as fearsome for good reason. This wasn't merely a matter of enchanting their blades. It required a deep understanding of cosmic forces and the will to manipulate powers that were meant to remain sealed. The very fact that she could accomplish such a feat speaks to both her magical prowess and her determination to see her plans through to completion. But Ranni's plan involved more than just the assassination of Godwyn. On the same night that the Black Knife assassins struck down the demigod prince, Ranni herself underwent a transformation equally dramatic. She arranged for her own physical death, severing her soul from her flesh and binding it to a doll body that would serve as her vessel in the ages to come. This dual death, Godwyn's soul dying while his body lived, and Ranni's body dying while her soul persisted, created a cosmic imbalance that would have far-reaching consequences. Some scholars theorize that this was always part of Ranni's plan, that she needed to create this specific type of metaphysical disruption to weaken the greater will's hold on reality. Ranni's relationship with the Black Knife assassins appears to have been one of mutual convenience rather than deep loyalty. She provided them with the means to accomplish their goals, while they provided her with the perfect tool to strike at the heart of the Golden Order. This alliance of convenience would eventually sour, as we'll explore later, leading to conflict between the very forces that had once worked together to change the world. The question of how Ranni gained access to the Black Knife assassins reveals important details about the political landscape of the Lands Between. These were not freelance killers available to the highest bidder. They were a highly specialized group with their own agenda and motivations. The fact that Ranni could convince them to work with her suggests either shared goals or a level of coercion that speaks to her considerable influence. Marika's possible involvement. One of the most intriguing and controversial aspects of the Knight of the Black Knives is the question of Queen Marika's involvement in the conspiracy. While Ranni is openly acknowledged as the orchestrator of the event, mounting evidence suggests that Marika herself may have been complicit in the assassination of her own son. The connection between Marika and the Black Knife assassins runs deeper than mere racial kinship. The armored description explicitly states that these women had close ties with Marika herself. This phrasing suggests a relationship that goes beyond the formal connection between a ruler and her subjects. It implies personal knowledge, perhaps even friendship or collaboration. Consider the logistics of the assassination. Godwyn was not some minor noble living in a poorly defended manor. He was a prince of the realm, likely surrounded by the most elite guards and protected by powerful magical wards. For the assassins to reach him, they would have needed intimate knowledge of the defenses around him, knowledge of his movements and habits, and perhaps most importantly, the ability to bypass or neutralize the security measures protecting him. Who would have had access to such information? Who could have provided the assassins with the intelligence they needed to succeed? The answer becomes obvious when we consider Marika's position. As Godwyn's mother and the ruler of the Golden Order, she would have had complete access to information about his protection and whereabouts. She could have provided the assassins with everything they needed to complete their mission. But why would a mother orchestrate the death of her own son? The answer lies in Marika's complex relationship with the Greater Will and the Golden Order she was supposed to represent. Evidence throughout the game suggests that Marika had grown disillusioned with her role as the Greater Will's vessel. She had begun to question the cosmic order she was meant to embody and had started planning ways to undermine or destroy it. Hugh the Blacksmith provides crucial insight into this theory through his dialogue about forging a weapon capable of slaying a god. He speaks of a promise he made to Queen Marika, suggesting that she was actively working toward the destruction of the very order she represented. If Marika was indeed planning to overthrow the Greater Will, the assassination of Godwyn makes sense as an opening move in a larger campaign. The Shattering itself provides further evidence of Marika's involvement. Her reaction to Godwyn's death, the destruction of the Elden Ring, seems disproportionate if she was genuinely surprised by the assassination. A shocked and grieving mother might be expected to seek vengeance or justice, not to destroy the fundamental law of reality. Her actions suggest that Godwyn's death was part of a larger plan that she was already committed to executing. There's also the matter of timing to consider. The Night of the Black Knives didn't occur in isolation. It happened at a moment when various forces were already positioning themselves for major changes in the political landscape. Marika's decision to banish Godfrey and the Tarnished, her growing conflict with the Greater Will, and her eventual shattering of the Elden Ring all suggest a coordinated campaign rather than a series of unrelated events. The hunt for the assassins. In the aftermath of the Night of the Black Knives, the surviving members of the assassin band found themselves hunted across the length and breadth of the lands between. Their successful strike against Godwyn had made them the most wanted criminals in the realm, and the forces of the Golden Order spared no effort in tracking them down. The hunt that followed the assassination reveals much about both the assassins' capabilities and the determination of their pursuers. These women had proven themselves capable of striking at the very heart of the Golden Order's power, and their continued existence posed an ongoing threat to the stability of the realm. Every moment they remained free was a reminder that even the mightiest could fall to a well-placed blade. Alicto, the Black Knife ringleader, represents the most prominent example of how this hunt played out. As the leader of the assassination squad, she bore primary responsibility for the night's events and became the most sought-after target in the subsequent crackdown. Her eventual capture and imprisonment in the ringleader's Everjail speaks to the resources and determination brought to bear in hunting down the conspirators. The Everjail itself is significant. These magical prisons were reserved for the most dangerous criminals, those whose continued existence posed too great a threat to allow them normal imprisonment or execution. The fact that Alecto was confined in such a facility, rather than simply executed, suggests either that killing her was deemed impossible, or that someone wanted her kept alive for reasons we can only speculate about. But the hunt claimed more than just freedom from the surviving assassins. Black Knife Tish, Alecto's own daughter, paid the ultimate price for her participation in the conspiracy. According to the lore surrounding her spirit ashes, Tish was killed protecting her mother during their flight from the royal capital. This tragic detail adds a deeply personal dimension to the political conspiracy, showing how the grand machinations of gods and Empyreans played out in terms of very human costs. The image of Tish dying to protect her mother during their escape from Lendel paints a poignant picture of the aftermath of their great triumph. These weren't cold-blooded killers fleeing the scene of a crime. They were family members desperately trying to protect each other from the consequences of their actions. The fact that Tish was willing to sacrifice her life for Alecto's escape speaks to bonds that went far deeper than mere professional association. The scattered nature of the surviving assassins across the lands between tells its own story about the hunt that pursued them. We encounter these women in locations ranging from forgotten catacombs to hidden caves, from sacred sites to cursed ruins. Each location tells a part of the story of their flight and the desperation that drove them to increasingly remote and dangerous refuges. Some assassins found themselves in places that seem almost symbolic of their fall from grace. The assassin in the death-touched catacombs, for instance, lurks among the undead in a place touched by the very death they helped unleash. Others, like the invisible assassin in Sage's Cave, have been reduced to hiding in darkness. Their legendary stealth skills turned from tools of political assassination to mere survival techniques. Weapons and techniques. The Black Knife assassins were defined not just by their political motivations or their racial heritage, but by their mastery of specialized weapons and techniques that made them uniquely suited for their deadly mission. Understanding their equipment and methods provides crucial insight into both their capabilities and the cosmic forces they wielded. The Black Knives themselves represent one of the most significant weapons in the entire history of the lands between. These aren't merely sharp daggers or enchanted blades. They are implements that have been fundamentally altered by the incorporation of the Rune of Death itself. The description of these weapons as misshapen speaks to the violent process by which they were created, as if the very metal had been twisted and corrupted by the power forced into it. The ritual that created these weapons was, according to Ranni, a fearsome rite that successfully imbued them with fragments of destined death. This wasn't a simple enchantment that could be dispelled or countered through conventional means. The power of death had been woven into the very essence of the blades, making them capable of killing beings who should have been immortal. The unique properties of these weapons become apparent when we examine their effects. Unlike conventional weapons that might wound or weaken their targets, the Black Knives inflict a form of damage that goes beyond the physical. They drain the maximum health of their victims, creating wounds that resist healing and regeneration. This reflects the deeper nature of the death they carry. Not just physical destruction, but a fundamental assault on the victim's very existence. The Blade of Death technique employed by the assassins represents the ultimate expression of their weapon's power. This ranged attack projects the essence of their blades across distance, allowing them to strike targets that might otherwise be beyond their reach. The projectile itself appears as a dark, writhing energy that seeks its target with supernatural persistence, embodying the relentless nature of death itself. But the assassins' equipment extended far beyond their signature weapons. Their armor, described as scale mail, forged to make no sound, represents a masterwork of craftsmanship designed specifically for stealth operations. Every piece was carefully constructed to eliminate the small sounds that might betray an assassin's presence. The scrape of metal on metal, the rustle of fabric, the creak of leather. The concealing veils worn by the assassins represent perhaps their most iconic equipment. These garments didn't simply hide their faces. They possessed magical properties that could render the wearer effectively invisible to most forms of detection. The power contained within these veils was so significant that traces of it remained even centuries after their creation, allowing later wearers to benefit from their stealth-enhancing properties. The footstep-muffling properties of their armor deserve special attention, as this detail reveals the meticulous planning that went into their equipment. Sound is often the first indicator of an approaching threat, and the ability to move in complete silence would have been invaluable for assassins operating in hostile territory. This wasn't just a matter of moving quietly, it was about achieving a level of stealth that bordered on the supernatural. Their movement techniques complemented their equipment perfectly. The assassins possessed an uncanny ability to appear and disappear seemingly at will, materializing from shadows to strike and then vanishing before their victims could mount an effective response. This wasn't mere sleight of hand or clever use of cover. It represented a form of movement that defied conventional understanding of space and time. The grab attack, employed by many Black Knife assassins, reveals their mastery of close-quarters combat. This technique allowed them to instantly close distance with their targets, seize them in an unbreakable grip, and deliver a killing blow before the victim could react. The speed and precision required for such an attack speaks to training that must have taken decades to master. The Eternal City connection deepened. The relationship between the Black Knife assassins and the Eternal Cities represents one of the most complex and fascinating aspects of their story. This connection goes far beyond simple alliance or mutual convenience. It reflects shared origins, common goals, and a deep understanding of forces that predate the current order of the lands between. The Nox people of Nokron and Noxtella were master artificers who specialized in creating weapons and technologies that defied conventional understanding. Their liquid metal weapons, their shape-shifting silver tears, and their advanced magical techniques all speak to a level of sophistication that rivals or exceeds anything produced by the Golden Order. The Black Knife Assassin's equipment bears clear hallmarks of this technological mastery. Consider the properties of their concealing veils, which create invisibility effects that persist even after the original enchantment should have faded. This type of enduring magic is characteristic of Nox craftsmanship, which emphasized creating items that would retain their power across centuries. The Eternal Cities were places where time itself seemed to flow differently, where the normal rules of decay and entropy were held at bay through sheer magical will. The Fingerslayer blade, found in Nokron, provides crucial context for understanding the Black Knife assassin's weapons. This curved, organic-looking sword was specifically designed to kill the two fingers, the agents of the Greater Will. Its creation required knowledge of cosmic forces and the will to forge a weapon capable of striking at beings that existed partially outside normal reality. The Black Knives represent a similar achievement. Weapons designed to kill specific targets that should have been beyond the reach of conventional arms. The architecture and layout of the Eternal Cities also tells us something about the people who created the Black Knife Assassin's equipment. These were not random underground settlements, but carefully planned metropolises designed to function in complete isolation from the surface world. The false night sky that hangs above these cities, the intricate network of bridges and platforms, the massive structures that seem to defy gravity, all of these speak to a people who refuse to accept limitations imposed by conventional reality. The punishment visited upon the Eternal Cities by the Greater Will provides important context for understanding the Black Knife Assassin's motivations. These cities were cast underground not for any crime against mortals, but for daring to challenge the cosmic order itself. Their rebellion was punished with exile from the stars they revered, condemned to exist beneath an artificial sky that mocked their former connection to the cosmos. This shared experience of persecution and exile would have created natural bonds between the Nox and the Black Knife Assassins. Both groups had suffered under the Greater Will's authority. both had seen their way of life threatened or destroyed by cosmic forces beyond their control. The assassination of Godwyn represents not just political calculation, but also revenge against the order that had caused them so much suffering. The presence of Dragonkin's soldiers in the Eternal Cities hints at another aspect of Nox's capabilities that may have influenced the Black Knife assassins. These artificial creatures were attempts to recreate the power of ancient dragons through technological means. While they were ultimately failures, flawed copies that could never match their originals, they demonstrate the Nox's willingness to experiment with forces of creation and destruction. This experimental attitude, this willingness to push boundaries and challenge established order, permeates everything we know about the relationship between the Eternal Cities and the Black Knife assassins. The very existence of weapons capable of killing immortal beings speaks to a mindset that refuses to accept that anything is truly beyond reach or immune to destruction. Individual assassins and their stories. Each Black Knife assassin encountered throughout the lands between carries her own story, her own reasons for being in the place where we find her, and her own relationship to the larger narrative of their sisterhood. These individual stories help us understand the human cost of their grand conspiracy and the personal struggles that continued long after the Night of the Black Knives. The assassin found in the death-touched catacombs presents one of the most poignant examples of how the aftermath of their mission affected individual members of the group. Here, in this underground tomb filled with the walking dead, we find a warrior who seems to have been literally surrounded by the consequences of her actions. The catacombs are described as being touched by death, a direct result of the death-root corruption that spread from Godwyn's undead body. This assassin's placement in such a location seems deeply symbolic. She exists among the undead, the very creatures spawned by the twisted death she helped create. There's a certain tragic irony in this. A warrior who sought to bring true death to an immortal being now finds herself surrounded by things that are neither truly alive nor properly dead. Her presence here raises questions about whether she chose this location as a form of penance, or whether she was drawn here by forces beyond her control. The invisible assassin hidden in Sage's cave represents another face of the post-conspiracy experience. Her use of complete invisibility suggests someone who has been driven to the ultimate extreme of stealth, forced to hide not just her actions, but her very existence from those who would hunt her. The cave itself is a place of secrets and hidden knowledge, appropriate for someone whose very presence must remain concealed from the world above. This particular assassin's fight mechanics tell their own story. Her reliance on invisibility and hit-and-run tactics speaks to someone who has been forced to adapt her combat style to the realities of being a hunted fugitive. Where once she might have fought openly alongside her sisters, now she must rely on concealment and surprise to survive each encounter. The assassin guarding the entrance to Sainted Hero's grave presents yet another variation on the theme of consequences and adaptation. This location is dedicated to heroes who died in service to the Erdtree, making her presence there particularly significant. Is she guarding the tomb out of some twisted sense of duty, or is she there to prevent the heroes within from finding the rest they deserve? Her positioning suggests someone still engaged in active opposition to the Golden Order's values and traditions. Black Knife Teach deserves special attention, both for her role in the original conspiracy and for the tragic circumstances of her death. As Alecto's daughter, she represents the generational aspect of the Black Knife assassin's mission. This wasn't just a group of professionals hired for a single job. It was a sisterhood that included family bonds and personal relationships that extended beyond mere politics. Teach's participation in the assassination of Godwyn reveals the depth of commitment required from the conspirators. This wasn't a decision made lightly or without understanding of the consequences. For a daughter to follow her mother into such a dangerous mission speaks to either complete trust in Alecto's leadership or shared conviction about the necessity of their actions. The circumstances of Teach's death, protecting her mother during their flight from the capital, adds a deeply personal dimension to the political consequences of their actions. This wasn't an abstract political punishment, but a very real family tragedy. The image of a daughter sacrificing herself so her mother might escape captures the human cost of the grand conspiracy in the most visceral way possible. Alecto herself, the Black Knife ringleader, represents the ultimate example of how leadership brings both power and consequence. Her imprisonment in the ringleader's Everjail speaks to her importance as both a symbol and a practical threat to the current order. The Everjail's location in the Moonlight Altar, an area associated with Ranni's influence, raises intriguing questions about who was responsible for her capture and confinement. The title ringleader itself suggests someone who was more than just the most skilled fighter among the assassins. This was someone who possessed the organizational skills and charismatic leadership necessary to coordinate a conspiracy of such scope and complexity. Her ability to unite the various assassins behind a single goal, to maintain operational security in the face of enormous risk, and to execute a plan that required precise timing and coordination all speak to exceptional leadership abilities. Her imprisonment rather than execution suggests that someone considered her too valuable to kill. Whether this was because of information she possessed, capabilities she retained, or symbolic importance she represented, the decision to keep her alive indicates that her story was far from over, even after her capture. The aftermath and betrayal. The relationship between the Black Knife assassins and their former allies underwent a dramatic transformation in the years following the Night of the Black Knives. What had once been cooperation in service of a shared goal devolved into conflict and betrayal, with the very people who had once worked together now seeking each other's destruction. The most shocking manifestation of this changed relationship came in the form of attacks on Ranni's inner circle. Both Blade, her loyal half-wolf shadow, and Iji, her trusted war counselor, found themselves targeted by Black Knife assassins in coordinated strikes that bear all the hallmarks of carefully planned operations rather than random violence. Blade's encounter with the assassins occurred at the base of Ranni's rise, the very heart of her domain. The presence of multiple assassin corpses around his location tells a story of fierce combat, of warriors who came prepared for a difficult fight and paid the ultimate price for their attempt. That they chose to attack Blade at this location, rather than ambushing him in some remote location, suggests either desperation or a deliberate attempt to send a message. The attack on Iji presents an even more complex scenario. Unlike Blade, who survived his encounter with the assassins, Iji was found dead, his massive form burning with black flames, rather than the expected effects of the assassin's death-imbued weapons. This detail has puzzled scholars, as it suggests either that the assassins had access to new types of weapons, or that other forces were involved in his death. The burning black flames surrounding Iji's corpse deserve particular attention, as they seem to connect his death to the Godskin apostles and their god-slaying black flame, rather than to the destined death carried by the Black Knife assassins. This inconsistency has led some to theorize that multiple factions were involved in the attacks on Ranni's supporters, or that the assassins had somehow gained access to different types of supernatural fire. The timing of these attacks provides crucial context for understanding the changed relationship between the assassins and Ranni. These strikes occurred after Ranni had successfully completed her transformation into her doll body and begun her journey toward achieving the Age of Stars ending. The assassins' actions suggest either that they disapproved of Ranni's ultimate goals, or that they had been manipulated into believing she had betrayed them. Several theories have emerged to explain this dramatic shift in allegiances. The most straightforward interpretation suggests that the Black Knife assassins had been deceived about Ranni's true intentions. Perhaps they believed they were striking a blow for freedom from the Greater Will's influence, only to discover that Ranni intended to replace one cosmic order with another equally restrictive system. Another theory proposes that the assassins' true loyalty lay not with Ranni, but with Queen Marika, and that they turned against Ranni when they realized she was pursuing goals that conflicted with Marika's own plans. This interpretation would explain both their initial cooperation with Ranni and their later hostility, positioning them as agents of Marika who had been temporarily allied with Ranni for mutual benefit. A more complex interpretation suggests that the Greater Will, or the Two Fingers, had somehow gained influence over the surviving assassins, turning them against their former allies through manipulation or coercion. This theory finds support in the fact that Blade himself was ultimately driven mad by his conflicting loyalties between Ranni and the Two Fingers who had created him. The question of who ordered these attacks remains one of the most contentious debates among scholars of Elden Ring lore. The fact that Alecto, the Black Knife ringleader, was imprisoned in an Everjail located within Ranni's own domain raises particularly intriguing possibilities. Did Ranni herself order Alecto's capture after discovering plans for the attacks? Or was Alecto imprisoned by other forces and left there as a message or warning? The presence of a Black Knife assassin outside the Queen's bedchamber in Leyndell presents another piece of this complex puzzle. This assassin's location, surrounded by the corpses of dead finger readers, suggests a systematic campaign against the servants of the Two Fingers. The symbolism here is unmistakable. The assassins were targeting not just individuals, but the entire infrastructure of the Greater Will's influence in the mortal realm. This pattern of attacks against finger readers throughout the capital suggests a coordinated effort to blind the Greater Will, to cut off its ability to communicate with and influence events in the lands between. Such a campaign would require both extensive knowledge of the finger readers' locations and the organizational capability to strike at multiple targets simultaneously. The weapons of death, the Black Knives themselves, deserve extensive examination, as they represent one of the most significant achievements in the entire history of magical craftsmanship in the lands between. These weapons are not merely tools, but embodiments of cosmic principles, physical manifestations of concepts that normally exist only in the abstract realm of divine power. The process by which these daggers were created remains shrouded in mystery, but the results speak to a level of magical sophistication that rivals anything achieved by the greatest sorcerers or smiths of the age. The description of the ritual as fearsome suggests that the creation process itself was dangerous, requiring not just technical skill, but the willingness to risk destruction in pursuit of ultimate power. The visual design of the Black Knives reflects their supernatural origin. Unlike conventional daggers with their clean lines and symmetrical forms, these weapons appear twisted and organic, as if they had grown rather than been forged. This misshapen quality isn't a flaw in their construction, but a reflection of the alien nature of the power they contain. The Rune of Death, being a cosmic force rather than earthly energy, could not be contained within conventional forms without warping them beyond recognition. The dual nature of the Black Knives' construction, part craftsmanship, part ritual magic, speaks to the collaboration between different types of expertise that made their creation possible. The physical daggers required master smiths capable of working with materials and techniques beyond normal understanding, while the magical imbuing required sorcerers or witches capable of manipulating the fundamental forces of existence. The fragment of the Rune of Death contained within each blade represents not just power, but responsibility. This wasn't borrowed or temporary authority, but permanent incorporation of divine essence into physical form. Each assassin who carried one of these weapons bore within her hands a piece of the cosmic order itself, transformed into an instrument of destruction. The effects of these weapons extend far beyond their immediate damage. The health-draining properties they possess reflect the deeper nature of the death they carry. Not just physical destruction, but existential erosion. When struck by a black knife, victims don't just lose health, they lose their connection to the forces that sustain life itself. This represents a form of damage that goes beyond healing. touching the very essence of what makes a being alive. The Blade of Death technique employed by the assassins demonstrates another aspect of their weapon's power. This ranged attack doesn't simply project force or energy, it extends the essential nature of the blade itself across distance. The dark projectile that emerges from the weapon carries with it the same death-dealing properties as the physical blade, allowing the assassins to strike at targets that might otherwise be beyond their reach. The persistence and tracking capabilities of this projectile reveal another layer of the weapon's supernatural nature. This isn't merely a magical arrow or bolt, but a manifestation of death itself, seeking its target with the inexorable certainty of fate. The way these projectiles curve and adjust their path to follow moving targets speaks to an intelligence inherent in the death they carry. Political implications and conspiracies. The Night of the Black Knives cannot be understood purely as an isolated act of violence. It was the culmination of a complex web of political relationships, hidden agendas, and competing visions for the future of the lands between. Understanding these political dimensions reveals how the assassination of a single individual could trigger events that would ultimately reshape the entire world. The timing of the assassination suggests careful coordination with other significant events in the political landscape of the lands between. This wasn't a spontaneous act of rebellion, but part of a larger strategy that had been developing for years, possibly decades. The level of planning required speaks to conspirators who understood not just the immediate goal of killing Godwyn, but the broader consequences their actions would trigger. Queen Marika's reaction to her son's death, the shattering of the Elden Ring itself, represents either the grief-stricken response of a devastated mother or the calculated next step in a plan she'd been developing all along. The speed and decisiveness with which she acted suggests the latter interpretation, indicating that she had already decided to destroy the cosmic order she was supposed to represent. The distribution of the great runes following the shattering reveals another layer of political calculation. These fragments of the Elden Ring didn't scatter randomly, but found their way to specific individuals who would use them to advance their own agendas. This pattern suggests either divine intervention or careful pre-planning about how the power would be divided once the ring was broken. The role of the two fingers in these events remains ambiguous but significant. As agents of the greater will, they should have been working to prevent any threat to the cosmic order. Yet their response to the assassination and subsequent shattering seems remarkably muted, raising questions about whether they were caught completely off guard, or whether they had their own reasons for allowing events to unfold as they did. Ranni's positioning as an Empyrean adds another layer of complexity to the political calculations surrounding the assassination. As a potential successor to Marika, she had legitimate claims to divine authority that would have made her a natural focal point for opposition to the current order. Her willingness to sacrifice her physical form to avoid the greater will's influence demonstrates the lengths to which the conspirators were willing to go to achieve their goals. The involvement of the Eternal Cities in the conspiracy represents an attempt to settle grievances that stretched back centuries. The Nox people had never forgiven their banishment underground, and the opportunity to strike back at the Golden Order through the assassination would have been irresistible. Their contribution of weapons technology and expertise transformed what might have been a simple political murder into a cosmic catastrophe. The broader implications of the conspiracy extend far beyond the immediate participants. The assassination demonstrated that even the mightiest of the demigods were vulnerable, that the apparent stability of the Golden Order was built on foundations far more fragile than anyone had imagined. This revelation would have encouraged other potential rebels and revolutionaries, contributing to the general breakdown of order that followed the shattering, the shadow of betrayal, the complex relationships between the various participants in the Night of the Black Knives, reveal a web of competing loyalties and hidden agendas that ultimately led to betrayal and conflict. Understanding these relationships helps explain how former allies became enemies and how the conspiracy that began with shared goals ended in mutual destruction. Ranni's relationship with the Black Knife assassins appears to have been transactional from the beginning. She provided them with the means to accomplish their goals, while they provided her with the capability to strike at Godwyn. This alliance of convenience worked well for the immediate purpose of the assassination, but the long-term compatibility of their goals was far from certain. The assassins' motivations for participating in the conspiracy remain somewhat mysterious. Were they motivated primarily by loyalty to Queen Marika, by opposition to the Golden Order, by promises of reward, or by threats of punishment? The fact that they eventually turned against Ranni suggests that their initial cooperation was based on incomplete information or false premises. Ranni's own statement about her willingness to betray everything and everyone in pursuit of her goals provides crucial insight into her character and motivations. She explicitly acknowledges that her path requires abandoning all previous loyalties and relationships, suggesting that she always intended to dispose of her allies once they were no longer useful. The fate of Alecto, imprisoned in the ringleader's Everjail, raises questions about the nature and timing of the breakdown in relationships between the conspirators. Was she captured by forces loyal to the Golden Order? Or was she betrayed by someone she had trusted? The location of her prison, within Ranni's own domain, suggests the latter possibility. Blade's struggle with conflicting loyalties provides a parallel example of how the conspiracy's success created untenable situations for its participants. As Ranni's shadow, he was bound to serve her, but as a creation of the Two Fingers, he was also programmed to oppose any threat to the greater will. His eventual madness and death represent the tragic cost of these irreconcilable obligations. E.G.'s fate illustrates another aspect of the conspiracy's aftermath. As Ranni's war counselor, he had helped plan and coordinate the events that led to the assassination. Yet when the time came for Ranni to complete her transformation and achieve her ultimate goals, he too became a target for elimination. His death suggests that even the most loyal supporters couldn't be trusted with knowledge of Ranni's final plans. The pattern of eliminating former allies reveals a ruthless calculation on someone's part, whether this was Ranni cleaning up loose ends, the greater will striking back at the conspirators, or some other force taking advantage of the situation. The systematic targeting of the conspiracy's participants suggests careful planning rather than random violence. The crucible of consequences. The assassination of Godwyn. The Golden unleashed consequences that extended far beyond what any of the conspirators could have anticipated. The unique nature of his death, soul destroyed while body preserved, created a form of corruption that spread throughout the lands between like a supernatural plague. The death root that began growing from Godwyn's remains represents one of the most visible manifestations of these unintended consequences. This wasn't merely organic decay, but a fundamental perversion of the natural cycle of life and death. The roots carried with them the essence of Godwyn's corrupted existence, spreading undeath wherever they touched. The deathbirds that began appearing throughout the lands between provide another example of how Godwyn's twisted death affected the broader world. These creatures, associated with ancient burial rites and the proper ordering of death, seem to be responding to the cosmic disruption caused by the assassination. Their appearance in locations previously untouched by such phenomena suggests that the effects of the Night of the Black Knives rippled outward in ways that crossed all boundaries. The emergence of those who live in death as a distinct category of being represents perhaps the most significant long-term consequence of the assassination. These weren't traditional undead raised by necromancy or curse, but beings caught in the same liminal state as Godwyn himself, neither properly alive nor completely dead. Their existence challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of life and death in the lands between. The Golden Order's response to these developments reveals how deeply the assassination had shaken their understanding of cosmic law. The creation of new incantations specifically designed to combat the undead, the establishment of specialized hunting parties, to track down and eliminate those who live in death, and the general atmosphere of fear and uncertainty all speak to an organization struggling to comprehend and control forces beyond their previous experience. The spread of corruption wasn't limited to the immediate area around Godwyn's remains. Deathroot began appearing in distant locations, carried by unknown means to places that should have been safe from contamination. This pattern suggests either that the corruption possessed its own form of malevolent intelligence, or that the cosmic disruption caused by Godwyn's death was affecting the fundamental structure of reality itself. The impact on the natural world extended beyond mere corruption. Plants and animals began exhibiting strange behaviors and mutations, as if the normal processes of life and death had been fundamentally altered. Rivers began flowing in new directions, weather patterns shifted without apparent cause, and the very fabric of space and time seemed to become less stable in certain areas. The psychological effects on the population of the lands between were equally significant. The knowledge that even the mightiest of demigods could be struck down by mortal hands shattered many people's faith in the established order. This loss of confidence contributed to the general breakdown of authority that followed the Shattering, as people began to question all forms of power and legitimacy. The technology of stealth, the equipment and techniques employed by the Black Knife assassins, represent the pinnacle of stealth technology in the lands between. Every aspect of their gear was designed to maximize their ability to approach targets undetected and escape without being identified or tracked. The concealing veils worn by the assassins deserve particular attention for their sophisticated magical properties. These garments didn't simply hide the wearer's face, but created a field of magical interference that made them difficult to perceive through normal senses. The effect was so complete that even centuries after their creation, traces of the original enchantment remain powerful enough to provide significant concealment benefits to new wearers. The persistence of these magical effects speaks to the sophistication of their original creation. This wasn't temporary magic that would fade with time, but fundamental alteration of the garment's essential nature. The veils had been transformed at a molecular level, becoming tools that existed partially outside normal reality and therefore partially outside normal perception. The armor worn by the assassins represents an equally impressive achievement in specialized craftsmanship. Every piece was designed and constructed to eliminate the small sounds that normally accompany movement in metal armor. The clink of mail links, the scrape of plate edges, the creak of leather straps. This required not just advanced metallurgy, but deep understanding of acoustics and movement dynamics. The scale mail construction of their armor provided an optimal balance between protection and flexibility. Unlike solid plate armor that might provide better protection but restrict movement, or simple cloth that allowed full mobility but offered little defense, the scale construction gave the assassins both the ability to move silently and the protection necessary to survive combat with heavily armed opponents. The footstep muffling properties of their equipment extended beyond mere sound dampening. The magical enhancement built into their boots and leg armor created a field effect that absorbed and dispersed the kinetic energy of their movement, preventing it from being transmitted to the ground as vibrations. This meant that even beings with supernatural hearing or tremor sense would have difficulty detecting their approach. Their movement techniques represented the culmination of training that must have taken decades to master. The ability to appear and disappear seemingly at will wasn't mere stage magic, but practical application of advanced stealth principles combined with magical enhancement. By moving in harmony with natural shadows and using their equipment's concealment properties at precisely the right moments, they could effectively vanish from sight even in broad daylight. The grab attack employed by many assassins demonstrates another aspect of their specialized training. This technique required not just physical strength and speed, but precise timing and understanding of human anatomy. The ability to instantly incapacitate a target through pressure point manipulation or nerve disruption speaks to medical knowledge that went far beyond simple combat training. The architecture of assassination, The successful assassination of Godwyn required not just skilled killers and effective weapons, but detailed intelligence gathering and careful planning that extended far beyond the night of the attack itself. Understanding the logistical challenges involved helps illuminate the scope of the conspiracy and the resources available to its organizers. Penetrating the defenses surrounding a demigod prince would have required intimate knowledge of security procedures, guard rotations, magical wards, and architectural layout. This information couldn't be gathered through casual observation, but would have required either inside sources or extended surveillance operations that could have taken months or years to complete. The timing of the assassination suggests coordination with other events that would distract or divert the attention of potential defenders. The simultaneous nature of Godwyn's death and Ranni's transformation wasn't coincidental, but carefully orchestrated to maximize the impact of both events while minimizing the chances of intervention or prevention. The escape plan executed by the assassins reveals another layer of preparation and foresight. These weren't suicide attackers planning to die in the attempt, but professional killers who expected to survive their mission and continue operating afterward. The fact that several of them did successfully escape the immediate area speaks to careful route planning and contingency preparation. The distribution of the surviving assassins across the lands between suggests either a pre-planned dispersal strategy or a breakdown in central coordination that forced each survivor to make her own way to safety. The locations where we eventually encounter these women, hidden caves, forgotten ruins, sacred sites turned profane, tell a story of increasingly desperate attempts to find refuge from pursuing forces. The weapons and equipment used in the assassination had to be prepared well in advance of the attack. The ritual that imbued the black knives with the power of death would have required extensive preparation, gathering of rare materials, and execution under precisely controlled conditions. This wasn't something that could be accomplished on short notice or without significant magical expertise. The coordination required to execute the assassination simultaneously with Ranni's transformation suggests a level of magical synchronization that goes beyond mere timing. Both events involved manipulation of cosmic forces and required precise magical timing to achieve the desired effects. This suggests either supernatural communication methods or planning so detailed that it accounted for every possible variable. The metaphysics of death. The Black Knife Assassin's weapons represent more than advanced magical craftsmanship. They embody a fundamental challenge to the metaphysical order of the lands between. Understanding their true significance requires examining the nature of death itself in this world, and how the assassin's actions disrupted cosmic law. In the cosmology of Elden Ring, death as understood by mortals was not a natural process, but an artificial construct imposed by the greater will through the Elden Ring. True death, represented by the Rune of Death, had been removed from the cosmic order and sealed away to prevent anyone from permanently destroying the gods and their servants. This created a world where the powerful could achieve effective immortality while maintaining control over the mortality of others. The theft of a fragment of the Rune of Death represented more than simple larceny. It was a fundamental violation of cosmic law that challenged the greater will's authority over the nature of existence itself. By incorporating this stolen power into physical weapons, the conspirators created tools capable of imposing true death, even on beings who should have been beyond its reach. The misshapen nature of the Black Knives reflects the difficulty of containing cosmic force within material form. The Rune of Death wasn't meant to exist as a physical object or to be channeled through conventional weapons. Its incorporation into the daggers required forcing fundamental forces of existence into forms that couldn't naturally contain them, resulting in weapons that appeared twisted and alien. The unique properties of the death inflicted by these weapons reveal their cosmic significance. Unlike normal death that affects only the physical body, or spiritual destruction that might affect only the soul, the Black Knives created a form of metaphysical damage that could separate soul from body, while leaving both partially intact. This type of death had never been seen before, and created entirely new categories of existence. Godwyn's transformation into the Prince of Death represents the ultimate expression of this metaphysical disruption. His state, neither alive nor dead, neither completely material nor entirely spiritual, became a new form of existence that influenced and infected other beings throughout the lands between. His undeath became a spreading corruption that challenged the fundamental categories by which life and death were understood. The death root that grew from Godwyn's remains carried with it the essence of this metaphysical corruption. These weren't merely mutated plants, but manifestations of disrupted cosmic law, physical expressions of the contradiction created by Godwyn's impossible state. Their spread throughout the lands between represented the ongoing infection of reality itself by forces that shouldn't exist. The appearance of those who live in death as a distinct category of being demonstrates how the assassination's consequences extended far beyond its immediate target. These beings, caught between life and death like Godwyn himself, represented the spread of metaphysical corruption to other aspects of the world's population. Their existence challenged every assumption about the nature of life, death, and the boundaries between them. The network of shadows. The Black Knife. Assassins didn't operate in isolation, but were part of a broader network of individuals and organizations that shared opposition to the current order, or had their own reasons for supporting the conspiracy. Understanding this network helps reveal the true scope of the forces arrayed against the Golden Order. The connection to the Eternal Cities provided the assassins with more than just weapons technology and magical expertise. The Nox people possessed knowledge of cosmic forces that predated the Greater Will's dominance, understanding of alternative forms of order that might replace the current system. This intellectual foundation would have been crucial for planning an operation that went beyond simple political murder to cosmic disruption. The involvement of various sorcerers and scholars in the conspiracy speaks to the intellectual appeal of challenging the Greater Will's authority. These weren't mere thugs hired for violence, but thinking individuals who had concluded that the current order was fundamentally flawed and needed to be overthrown. Their participation provided the conspiracy with analytical capabilities and strategic planning that went far beyond simple assassination. The role of certain nobles and political figures in supporting or enabling the conspiracy remains largely hidden, but evidence suggests that the assassins enjoyed more political protection than would have been possible without high-level cooperation. The fact that several of them successfully escaped immediate pursuit and remained at large for extended periods indicates either exceptional personal skill or assistance from individuals with significant resources and influence. The timing of various political events around the night of the Black Knives suggests coordination with other efforts to destabilize the Golden Order. The banishment of Godfrey and the Tarnished, the growing tensions between different demigod factions, and various other political developments all created an environment where a successful assassination might trigger broader collapse rather than simply prompting increased security measures. The magical infrastructure required to support the conspiracy would have demanded cooperation from multiple specialized practitioners. The ritual that created the Black Knives, the concealment magics that hid the assassins' preparations, and the coordination that enabled simultaneous action across great distances all point to a network of magical practitioners working together toward common goals. The intelligence gathering that enabled the assassination required either extensive infiltration of the Golden Order's security apparatus or cooperation from individuals already positioned within those organizations. The level of detailed knowledge about Godwyn's location, defenses, and daily routine suggests either long-term surveillance operations or inside sources providing crucial information. The price of ambition. The ultimate fate of the Black Knife assassins serves as a cautionary tale about the price of involvement in cosmic conspiracies. Their initial success in assassinating Godwyn was followed by a series of increasingly desperate struggles for survival, betrayals by former allies, and ultimately death or imprisonment for most of their number. 4. Alecto's imprisonment in the ringleader's Everjail represents the most visible example of how the conspiracy's leaders paid for their ambitions. Her confinement in this magical prison, cut off from her followers and prevented from continuing her mission, serves as both punishment and warning to others who might consider similar actions. The Everjail's location within Ranni's domain raises questions about who was responsible for her capture and what their motivations might have been. Tisha's death protecting her mother during their flight from the capital illustrates the personal cost of the conspiracy for individual participants and their families. This wasn't an abstract political consequence, but a very real human tragedy, a daughter sacrificing her life so her mother might escape the consequences of their shared actions. The emotional weight of this sacrifice adds a deeply personal dimension to what might otherwise be seen as purely political events. The systematic hunting and elimination of the surviving assassins demonstrates the Golden Order's determination to exact revenge for the attack on Godwyn. This wasn't merely law enforcement, but a campaign of retribution designed to ensure that no trace of the conspiracy remained to inspire future resistance. The resources devoted to this hunt speak to both the threat the assassins represented and the fear their success had generated among the ruling powers. The betrayal of the assassins by their former allies reveals how quickly political alliances can shift when circumstances change. Whether this betrayal came from Ranni seeking to eliminate potential threats to her own plans, from Marika distancing herself from the consequences of actions she had enabled, or from other forces taking advantage of the situation, it demonstrates the vulnerability of those who place their trust in grand political schemes. The scattered locations where the surviving assassins made their final stands tell individual stories of desperation and defiance. From hidden caves to forgotten ruins, from sacred sites turned profane to the very heart of the capital itself, each location represents a final act of resistance against forces that had proven overwhelming. These final battles speak to warriors who refused to surrender even when hope was lost. The transformation of some assassins into the very forces they had once opposed illustrates another aspect of the conspiracy's ultimate failure. The corruption that spread from Godwyn's undead form began to affect even those who had created it, turning hunters into hunted and rebels into monsters. This ironic reversal demonstrates how cosmic forces, once unleashed, recognize no boundaries between friend and foe. Legacy of the Black Knives. The influence of the Black Knife assassins extends far beyond their immediate actions, shaping the political, magical, and metaphysical landscape of the lands between in ways that continue to resonate long after most of their number have been eliminated. Understanding this legacy helps explain why their story remains relevant to current events and future possibilities. The demonstration that even demigods could be killed by mortal hands fundamentally altered the political calculations of every major power in the lands between. The apparent invulnerability of the ruling class, one of the primary sources of their authority and legitimacy, had been shattered by the assassins' success. This realization encouraged other potential rebels and revolutionaries, while forcing the remaining powers to invest heavily in security measures that had previously been considered unnecessary. The magical innovations represented by the Black Knives continue to influence the development of weapons and techniques throughout the lands between. The principles used to imbue physical objects with cosmic forces have been studied and adapted by various magical practitioners, leading to new forms of enchantment and weapon crafting that build upon the assassins' groundbreaking work. The metaphysical disruption caused by Godwyn's unique death continues to spread corruption throughout the world, creating new categories of existence and challenging fundamental assumptions about the nature of life and death. The ongoing presence of those who live in death and the continued spread of Deathroot serve as permanent reminders of the assassin's actions and their unintended consequences. The political precedent established by the conspiracy has inspired numerous other attempts to use assassination and subterfuge to achieve political goals. While none have achieved the cosmic scope of the Knight of the Black Knives, the basic strategy of striking at key figures to trigger broader systemic collapse has been attempted by various factions with varying degrees of success. The techniques and equipment developed by the assassins have been copied and adapted by numerous other groups seeking to develop their own stealth capabilities. While few have achieved the supernatural level of concealment mastered by the original Black Knife assassins, their methods have influenced the evolution of infiltration and assassination techniques throughout the lands between. The locations where the assassins made their final stands have become sites of pilgrimage for those who admire their defiance of authority or seek to understand the forces they unleashed. These locations, marked by violence and tragedy, continue to attract scholars, treasure hunters, and political dissidents who see in the assassin's story inspiration for their own struggles against established power. The philosophy of resistance. The Black Knife assassins represent more than skilled killers or political conspirators. They embody a particular philosophy of resistance that challenges the fundamental assumptions underlying authority and cosmic order. Understanding this philosophical dimension helps explain both their motivations and their ultimate fate. Their willingness to steal divine power and use it against the gods themselves reflects a rejection of the idea that some forms of authority are inherently legitimate or beyond challenge. This wasn't mere rebellion against specific policies or leaders, but fundamental opposition to the concept that cosmic forces should determine mortal fate without possibility of resistance or appeal. The precision and planning that went into their operations demonstrates a philosophical commitment to effectiveness over symbolism. These weren't random acts of violence intended to express frustration or despair, but carefully calculated strikes designed to achieve specific strategic objectives. Their approach suggests a mature understanding of how power operates and what types of actions are necessary to challenge it effectively. Their acceptance of personal sacrifice in service of larger goals reveals a worldview that prioritizes abstract principles over individual survival or comfort. The fact that many of them continued fighting even when defeat became inevitable suggests commitment to ideals that transcended mere personal interest or survival instinct. The betrayals and conflicts that ultimately destroyed their organization illustrate the inherent tensions within any movement that challenges fundamental cosmic order. When the goal is to overthrow the basic structure of reality itself, the question of what should replace it becomes critically important, and disagreements about this question can prove fatal to revolutionary movements. Their lasting influence on subsequent resistance movements demonstrates how philosophical frameworks can outlive their original practitioners. Even though most of the Black Knife assassins were eventually killed or captured, their example continues to inspire others who share their fundamental opposition to unchallenged authority. The corruption and unintended consequences that followed their greatest success serve as a warning about the unpredictable nature of cosmic forces and the difficulty of controlling the results of actions that challenge fundamental order. Their story suggests that while resistance to unjust authority may be morally necessary, the outcomes of such resistance can be far more complex and problematic than originally anticipated. Conclusion. As we reach the end of our deep dive into the lore of the Black Knife assassins, we find ourselves confronting one of Elden Ring's most complex and morally ambiguous narratives. These women were simultaneously victims and perpetrators, heroes and villains, liberators and destroyers. Their story defies simple categorization, challenging us to grapple with questions about the nature of justice, the price of freedom, and the unintended consequences of even the most well-intentioned actions. The Black Knife assassins succeeded in their immediate goal of killing Godwyn the Golden, striking a blow against the golden order that reverberated throughout the cosmos. Yet their success came at a terrible price, not just for themselves and their immediate allies, but for the entire world they claimed to be trying to save. The corruption that spread from Godwyn's undead form, the breakdown of natural order that followed the Shattering, and the countless deaths that resulted from the wars that followed, all stand as testament to the complexity of their legacy. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of their story is how their noble intentions, the desire to free the world from cosmic tyranny, became entangled with personal ambitions, political calculations, and forces beyond their understanding or control. They sought to bring true death to an immortal oppressor, but instead created new forms of undeath that proved even more terrible than what they had sought to destroy. Their individual stories, from Electo's imprisonment to Tisha's sacrifice, to the lonely deaths of unnamed assassins in forgotten corners of the world, remind us that even the grandest political conspiracies are ultimately made up of individual human beings with their own hopes, fears, relationships, and sacrifices. The cosmic scope of their actions never erased the personal costs they paid or the very human emotions that drove their choices. The techniques and technologies they developed, the philosophical framework they embodied, and the precedent they established all continue to influence events throughout the lands between long after their organization was destroyed. In this sense, they achieved a form of immortality more lasting than anything the Golden Order could provide, not through divine blessing or cosmic favor, but through the enduring impact of their actions on the world they helped to transform. The mystery surrounding their ultimate loyalties and motivations serves as a reminder that history is rarely as simple as it initially appears. Were they pawns in Queen Marika's grand design to destroy her own order? Were they true believers in Ranni's vision of a world free from the Greater Will's influence? Were they seeking revenge for ancient wrongs committed against their people? Or were they driven by motivations so complex and contradictory that even they themselves might not have fully understood them? Perhaps the answer is that they were all of these things simultaneously, complex individuals caught up in forces larger than themselves while still trying to maintain agency and purpose in the face of cosmic indifference. Their story resonates precisely because it captures this tension between individual will and cosmic fate, between the desire for freedom and the reality of consequence, between the nobility of resistance and the tragedy of unintended destruction. As we contemplate their legacy, we're left with questions that have no easy answers. Was their rebellion justified, even given its terrible consequences? Could they have achieved their goals through less destructive means? Were the forces they unleashed ultimately more liberating or more oppressive than those they sought to destroy? These questions matter not just for understanding the past, but for evaluating the moral choices that continue to face those who would challenge unjust authority in any age. The Black Knife. Assassins remind us that even in a world of gods and cosmic forces, individual choices matter. Their story is ultimately one of agency. The decision to act rather than accept, to resist rather than submit, to risk everything for the possibility of change. Whether we judge their choices as wise or foolish, heroic or tragic, their willingness to stake everything on their convictions commands a certain respect. In the end, the Black Knife Assassins achieved something that few rebels in any age can claim. They fundamentally changed the world. Not in the way they intended, perhaps, and not without terrible cost, but undeniably and irreversibly. The lands between after the Night of the Black Knives was a fundamentally different place than it had been before, and that transformation, with all its complexity and contradiction, stands as their ultimate monument. Their story serves as both inspiration and warning. Inspiration for those who would resist injustice and oppression, warning about the unpredictable nature of the forces such resistance might unleash. It reminds us that the choice to act against overwhelming power requires not just courage, but wisdom, not just determination, but understanding of consequence, not just desire for change, but acceptance of responsibility for whatever change might result. The shadows cast by their passing continue to fall across the lands between, and their influence will likely persist as long as there are those who remember that even gods can die when mortals are willing to pay the price for their destruction. In their triumph and their tragedy, in their nobility and their failure, they embody the eternal tension between order and chaos, between acceptance and resistance, between the world as it is and the world as it might be. And so concludes our deep dive into the lore of the Black Knife Assassins. We've discovered how these mysterious women shape the very foundation of Elden Ring's narrative, how their actions set in motion the events that define the entire game world, and how their legacy continues to influence the choices available to those who would follow in their footsteps. The legacy of these silent warriors reminds us that in a world of gods and monsters, the most dangerous weapon is often wielded by those who refuse to accept that change is impossible. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the shadows of the lands between. If you enjoyed this deep exploration into one of Elden Ring's most fascinating factions, please like this video and subscribe to Lore 2 RPG for more comprehensive dives into gaming's greatest stories. Until next time, keep exploring those epic tales, fellow adventurers.